There we go. Here's the point submission form for get 2 points for being at the GBM today. If you guys want to scan that and upload your photos, I'll give you everyone a sec. All right. And then for points and dues, I'm pretty sure everyone knows how it works now. I know there was some difficulty with paying dues. I know the link on the membership form wasn't working, so I fixed that. You can scan the QR code and pay dues through here, or you can pay through our treasurer, Emily. Um, if you had trouble with the link on the form, it is now working, so you can use that too to pay dues. And then again, 2 points for being at GBMs, 1 point for socials, 3 points for events. Recap on Adapted Sports Showcase. This was last Friday. Thank you for everyone who came, volunteered, and supported. It really means a lot to us. It's an event that we enjoy putting on every year. It's our biggest event of the year, so it's always nice to see support from the members in our club and students, faculty, and the community members. It was really great to hear all the amazing perspectives from the Paralympian panel. We had a couple of our SDSU adapted athletes there as well, and they shared some really cool perspectives on their journeys making it through adaptive sports. And then the Paralympians had great perspectives on their rise to the elite level of competition. So it was really cool to hear from them. Hopefully, we'll have them join us again in the future. And then we also got to see a really high level wheelchair basketball exhibition between Eastern Washington and the University of Michigan. That was really cool to see. Got to see how fast paced and competitive collegiate wheelchair basketball is. Some upcoming events to talk about. So this Friday, we have a volunteer event worth 3 points. It's the San Diego Coastal Classic Track Meet. So this will be on Friday from 1:30 to 5:30 p.m. at the Sports Deck. So this event really helps support our adapted athletics track and field team who will be competing in the event. It's a track meet, including the D1 teams for track and field, but our athletes will be competing as well. So it really helps out if we can get members and people to volunteer and support to show support for the adaptive athletics and Aztec adaptive sports at the event. The tasks will be kind of basic track and field tasks, setting up equipment and hurdles, stuff like that, taking measurements and helping out with check-in, nothing too intense or crazy. And then also, I know it's 1:30 to 5:30, but you don't have to stay the entire time. Just if you have somewhere to be, it would be great if you could just stay for a couple hours and help out. It really would help out our athletes, and they would be very appreciative. So you can scan the QR code there to sign up, or the volunteer sign up form is also on the 2026 event calendar. Another event, this one's coming up next Monday, March 16th. This one's worth 1 point. This is the wheelchair basketball social. So if you guys were at the Adapted Sports Showcase, you guys got to see two collegiate teams play wheelchair basketball, and now you can try it out yourself. We won't be quite at the same level as them, but it's still really fun to try out, play against other members in the club, play against the board. It's a really good time. You can hang out and just try out this sport. We'll have the wheelchairs out and some basketballs, and we'll just have a bunch of fun. So this will be from 6 to 8 p.m. in the Arc on Monday. And then another GBM coming up 2 weeks from today will be with Stephanie Wazit from Miracle League San Diego. So this will be 5:30 p.m. on Zoom, just like today. She's a coordinator for the Miracle League San Diego, and this is an organization that helps individuals with physical disabilities participate in baseball. So they have volunteers pair up with these athletes, support them, help them out with whatever they need, and help them be active and enjoy playing sports. So it's a really cool organization. I know they have a lot of cool volunteer opportunities and ways to get involved. So it'll be really cool to hear what Stephanie has to say and what opportunities she has for our members and us. And then I'll give it up to Dr. Christopher Ebner.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you, William. Wow, thanks for that background and nice synopsis. You guys are doing some amazing stuff there up in San Diego State University in Aztec. So I applaud all y'all's efforts. I appreciate the invite tonight to come and talk to you guys. So A little bit of background about me. I've been an occupational therapist for a little bit over 21 years now. I spent first 15 years of my professional career was in the Department of Defense. I had approximately about 6 years on active duty as an officer in the Army Medical Specialist Corps as an occupational therapist. And then the remaining amount of time was spent on the civilian side as a federal employee, still doing my job as an occupational therapist, but I wasn't on active duty anymore. So I had a total of about 15 years in the Department of Defense as an occupational therapist. And following that, I've been assistant professor at the University of St. Augustine on our Austin campus for the last 7+ years. So when Kalina reached out to me initially and asked me if I would like to come and be a guest speaker this evening, I was trying to think of the best way to talk about my background and experience as an occupational therapist and kind of how that, how that relationship developed with the adaptive sports community, adaptive sports movement. And I think, the best way to talk about this lecture tonight is through the lens of my experience as an occupational therapist in the Army. I'll tell you, the types of outpatient clinical rehabilitation programs that we've had that have been established over the course of the last several decades through efforts with the global war on terrorism have been such that these type of experiences, to include adaptive sports experiences, are uniquely integrated into all facets of our outpatient rehabilitation programs in the Department of Defense. So I can honestly say, without having my background and experience in the Department of Defense, both active duty on the civilian and on the civilian side as well as an occupational therapist, I would more than likely not have the skill set that I do today. I think, just kind of going forward, you guys still realizing y'all are undergraduates considering graduate programs in physical therapy or occupational therapy. I can tell you that you guys are embarking upon a very rewarding career in healthcare, particularly nowadays in the current climate that we're in. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about the intro. I am going to share my screen. I've got a little bit, it sounds like I need to stop sharing. So I will send that request over to William so he can allow me to share my screen really quick so you can catch my PowerPoint. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run through, I'm big on storytelling, right? So I got a couple slides that I'm gonna be sharing with you guys this evening. And then what we'll do is after this quick presentation, we'll go through and I'll answer some questions you guys may have, okay? So everybody should see my screen. Camos to khakis, talking about my experience as an occupational therapist in the Army. Got a little bit of a quick disclosure. Basically just all the views, anything expressed in this presentation is solely my perspective and not the official perspective of the Department of Defense, United States Army Medical Department, or any of those other entities that are mentioned on the screen. So I'd say, over the course, as I reflect over the last 21 years, I've truly been blessed in my clinical career as an occupational therapist in the Army and the Department of Defense. My experience from serving in the Army as an active duty officer and federal civilian employee have provided me with a multitude of opportunities that have enabled me to advance my clinical career, travel the world, and work with some of the most amazing individuals I've had the distinct pleasure of knowing. I'm going to share a few stories with y'all this evening in hopes that y'all may find a few pearls of wisdom and develop a newfound appreciation for the clinical services that we provide on a daily basis in the Department of Defense as occupational therapist. So I want to begin tonight with one date that forever changed the world in which we live in. Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, marked one of the very first days of my very first semester of graduate school and my master's program at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, UAB. My fellow students, faculty, and I were in our therapeutic media class as we witnessed the events of 9/11 unfold on the television as the Twin Towers collapsed in New York, the plane hit the Pentagon in DC, and Flight 93 crashed into a field in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. I did not know at this time that this particular day would have a direct impact on my own career path. Towards the end of my didactic work at UAB, I applied for and was accepted into the United States Army Occupational Therapy internship, a very intense 9-month clinical fieldwork affiliation with the focus in inpatient acute care, outpatient orthopedics, and mental health at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I accepted a direct commission into the Army as a second lieutenant and was off to officer basic course training at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. Let me be the first to say that I had no clue about the immediate challenges and tests that lied ahead as I began my path to become an officer in the Army Medical Specialist Corps. I distinctly recall one particular day of training at OBC. We were conducting a land navigation course in midsummer. As we all know, summers in Texas are extremely hot, and the situation was further complicated by the fact that I was wearing camo fatigues and had about 50 pounds of gear strapped to my back. As I crossed through the hill country, attempting to find my next land navigation point, I remember stopping for a brief moment to take a knee, catch my breath, wipe the sweat from my forehead, and gather my thoughts. I thought to myself, I just completed graduate school, and here I am dressed in camos, walking through the hill country cactus lost. I asked myself how to get here, and then I remembered that I'd signed my oath of office and was really in the Army now. As you all begin your professional careers in the new future, you may find yourself wondering about a few uncertainties in your life, or maybe even career choices. Rest assured that each of you will have the tools and knowledge that will enable you to be successful in any and all of your future pursuits. Over the course of the next 5 to 10 years, you all should take time to identify opportunities when they present themselves, and then be willing to walk through the door when someone opens it for you. As you begin your clinical careers in the very near future, I also encourage each of you all to seek out those mentors that will empower you and further contribute to your growth, experience, and knowledge in whatever area or domain of practice you choose to follow. I have been extremely fortunate throughout my clinical career with both the opportunities that have presented themselves and the mentors that have taken the time to make me a better clinician. Following 3 months of required military training in San Antonio, my family and I moved to Washington, D.C., where I was challenged once again with 9 months of level 2 clinical fieldwork rotations. As I reflect on my transitions during this time, I now realize that I faced and overcome many different challenges. Becoming a new officer, Army officer, beginning my career as an Army OT, raising a family, and the extended distance between home and family. I applied for the Army internship knowing that this experience would be challenging, though it also provided me with the opportunity to advance my knowledge in an accelerated environment that was forever changing and evolving. The one significant component that I figured out through this early experience was that one should learn to take calculated risks that will enable growth both personally as well as professionally. Find the courage to step out of your comfort zone, think outside the box, seek and conquer the variety of challenges that lie ahead, and always stay hungry. The global war on terrorism was in its first years as I rotated through Walter Reed Army Medical Center, which happened to be one of the major level 1 trauma centers where most of the medical evacuations, or medevacs as we say in the military, transitioned through as soldiers, airmen, Marines, and sailors went sent back from overseas to the United States, where they would receive definitive medical care and rehabilitation. My experience as an intern at Walter Reed and the exposure to the variety of polytrauma type cases certainly impressed upon me the importance and honor associated with taking care of our nation's most wounded, ill, and injured service members. This was the very first time in my life that I'd ever been exposed to such a high level and variety of severe trauma. The vast majority of rehabilitation cases included very complex polytrauma type injuries, to include amputations, orthopedic trauma, ocular injuries, mental health conditions, traumatic brain injuries, to name just a few. Unfortunately, I frequently encountered and treated clients with a combination of these diagnoses, which required me to constantly be on my A game in order to ensure both client and clinical priorities were in order. Today, service members have approximately a 95% survival rate, as the emergency medical care teams can get to these wards within the first hour, also known as the golden hour. This far exceeds survival rates from previous conflicts such as World War I, World War II, and Vietnam. Ultimately, this has resulted in a much higher number of complex rehabilitation cases that require extensive long-term care and rehabilitation. Ultimately, 3 primary factors contributing to this high survival rate have been the expeditious medical evacuation process, taking anywhere between 3 to 5 days for major combat zone, advancements in personal protective body equipment such as body armor, and then advanced life-sustaining medical care in the immediate battle zone. Things such as instant clotting agents, self-administered tourniquets, and highly trained combat medics. Upon completion of my Army internship at Walter Reed, my family and I moved to San Antonio, Texas, where I was assigned as a staff clinician at Brooke Army Medical Center, currently known as San Antonio Area Military Medical Center, at Fort Sam Houston in July of 2004. This was my first assignment as a new clinician. As a young company grade officer, I was provided with the opportunity to take the lead as an officer in charge of a variety of different rehabilitation programs, to include outpatient orthopedics, inpatient acute care, low vision rehabilitation services, the Army Alcohol and Substance Abuse Program, the Assisted Technology Program for Wounded Service Members, and Amputee Occupational Therapy Services. Over the course of my first assignment at SAMC, I was once again provided with the opportunity to expand my knowledge, develop my clinical skill sets, and become a better leader. In 2005, we opened up the Second Department of Defense Amputee Care Center of Excellence, also known as ARCS, at Fort Sam Houston. It was during this time that I began to focus my clinical efforts into amputee rehabilitation. In March of 2007, I made the transition from active duty as a captain to the civilian workforce. It was during that time at SAMC opened the doors to the Center for the Intrepid, a brand new $50 million state-of-the-art advanced outpatient rehabilitation facility dedicated to the rehabilitation of service members who have sustained amputations, burns, and limb salvage. I was fortunate enough to transition from active duty assignment directly into my civil service position as a staff clinician at the CFI. In the latter part of 2007, beginning of 2008, the Army Medical Department began to stand up warrior transition units in place of the old medical hold units for service members who were undergoing medical evaluation boards to determine their actual fitness for duty. The primary purpose of these warrior transition units was to ensure each and every service member received the highest level of medical care and administrative support during their transition period. Over the course of the next 4 to 5 years, during the height of the global war on terrorism, I continued to advance my clinical knowledge in amputee rehabilitation through clinical care and a variety of research initiatives. During this time, we witnessed vast advancements in surgical techniques, clinical treatments, and the evolution of new types of prosthetic devices for those service members who have sustained limb loss. I can honestly say that I take great pride in knowing that all of our wounded, ill, and injured service members receive the highest level of medical care and support services. As of 1 October 2018, there have been a total of 1,720 service members who have sustained amputation while serving in operations Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, New Dawn, Inherent Resolve, and Freedom Sentinel. 31%, a total of 533, have sustained multiple limb amputations. I find comfort in knowing that our men and women who have sacrificed life and limb are entitled to and receive nothing short of the very best. Having the ability to see a need and fill a need as a clinician in the Department of Defense has allowed me to deliver the highest level of support of each and every service member I have had the distinct pleasure and honor to work with. I have a close friend and mentor who once told me, you should always treat each and every client you encounter as you would want one of your own family members to be treated. We should always strive to empower and support our clients as they travel the road to recovery throughout the healing process. This may simply mean going above and beyond as an advocate for a particular client who may benefit from additional therapy, or simply listening to a client when they need to or have the desire to tell you their own story. I recall one particular client that I worked with during my tenure at the Center for the Intrepid in San Antonio, Texas. This individual was an airman in the Air Force whose particular occupation was explosive ordnance disposal. Basically, these individuals were responsible for going out in the combat zone to find improvised explosive devices and other types of bombs and then dispose of them. This particular client had served in the Air Force for a little over 16 years with multiple deployments to combat zones. During his last tour, he sustained multiple injuries from an improvised explosive device, which ultimately resulted in an open head injury, an above elbow amputation, a multitude of orthopedic injuries, and total complete blindness. During my first visit with this particular client in the intensive care unit, I was unable to communicate very effectively with him, secondary to the fact that his jaw was wired shut due to facial fractures he had sustained. His wife was sitting next to him bedside, which immediately provided me with a sense that everything was going to be okay. Over the course of the next several months, we began to prepare this airman for his prosthesis. The immediate challenge was trying to figure out how we would manage to train him in the use of his upper extremity prosthesis, as most require vision to process where the limb is located in space and the position of the terminal device, the prosthetic hand and wrist. Initially, we were successful with tactile feedback using a sound limb to detect movements and positions of his prosthetic components. Over the course of several months, this airman attended therapy 2 times a day for low vision rehab and prosthetic training, always willing and able to accept any new challenge we had in store for him in therapy. This individual is always smiling, looking forward to new topics to discuss, and eagerly awaited the new challenges of rehabilitation with his dedicated wife by his side each and every day. I recall one particular day when I was working with this client in the clinic and noticed him to be kind of seem out of sorts, so to speak, and wasn't talking a whole lot during our session. I then realized that he had a lot of thoughts he was pondering and needed to get some things off his chest. Once I was able to transition our conversation into a private office, this airman, who had survived a very traumatic experience and remained extremely stoic throughout this process, proceeded to break down in tears. I remember listening to him tell all the stories of success he'd had during his military career, only to feel like his life was now over. I was the first person, in addition to his wife, whom this airman felt completely comfortable with disclosing his story. The gains that we made that afternoon far exceeded what we may have accomplished in a 1 hour therapy session. This airman continued to make amazing strides in his rehabilitation and was discharged from outpatient rehabilitation services approximately 1 year from the date of his injury. Always take time to listen to your clients. They may have some interesting stories, and more importantly, you will earn more trust that will certainly endure any challenges you and your client may encounter on the road to recovery. I encourage each and all y'all to continue to honor all of our active duty military and veterans, as each have raised their hands and swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. Service members returning from multiple deployments from Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places around the globe continue to face many different challenges today. Reintegration back into family life, facing the reality they're no longer back in the combat zone, and a variety of other challenges associated with injury and illness. Over the last decade, we've begun to see a remarkable shift in the stigma associated with mental health illness. Now more than ever, our senior leaders are encouraging those service members with mental health issues to seek help. Now more than ever, more service members are seeking out behavioral health support and clinical services. Both the Department of Defense and Department of Veterans Affairs have dramatically expanded their programs and support services for those individuals suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and mental health diagnoses. These conditions have been some of the most challenging for our service members to cope with, as they are often unseen in comparison to a physical injury. A successful reintegration back into a civilian life requires a high level of care support from the individual, family, the community, and the healthcare team. In June 2011, my Army civilian career took yet another direction as I accepted a position as the occupational therapy supervisor for the Warrior Transition Battalion Europe in Heidelberg, Germany. This transition from clinician to supervisor and program manager also came with a series of challenges. Unlike the Warrior Transition units in the United States, our organization in Europe was spread out over 75,000 square miles across 3 different countries: Germany, Italy, and Belgium. Managing occupational therapy services, personnel, and programs across this very dispersed footprint required me to become even more diverse in my capabilities as a clinician and program manager. The WTB's mission was to provide rehabilitative care and administrative support services to all those service members in Europe who were wounded, ill, or injured. This included service members who had sustained combat-related injuries, orthopedic injuries, mental health disorders, to include post-traumatic stress disorder, and a variety of other conditions to include cancer, etc. Preparing soldiers to either return back to duty or complete a medical evaluation board process and transition to the civilian sector was my primary duty during my 4-year tenure over there in Germany. During this time, my team and I established a variety of vocational training programs, educational opportunities, and adaptive sports experience in order to assist these service members during their transition time. In July of 2015, my family and I returned back from overseas to San Antonio, Texas, where I went back to the work at the Center for the Intrepid. I continued to work at as an OT at the CFI until December 2017, when my wife accepted a position at the Department of Defense Education Agency in Seoul, South Korea. Just to kind of skip forward, in November of 2018, I became a part of the dynamic team at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences in Austin, Texas. A little over 21 years since the beginning of my military career. I've almost come full circle, as I just recently completed my EDD in sports management through the United States Sports University just this past December. So fresh off the press. I would say in closing, like as you all transition from academia into practice, I encourage you guys to explore ways in which you may expand your knowledge, diversify your experiences in your resume, in search of those meaningful experiences that will continue to enrich both your life and those around you. Just want to say thank you to Aztec, Adaptive Sports, Kalina. Appreciate you guys spending some time with me this evening. On the screen right now, you see the QR code. My dissertation manuscript just got indexed in ProQuest. If you guys are interested in reading on that, it's a qualitative study looking at the lived experiences of amputees engaged in adaptive sports. Really interesting study, and quite honestly, some some of these folks were up to 22 years post amputation that actually participated in this study. Couple things, for those that may be interested in military or working as an occupational physical therapist in the military, there's lots of different points of entry. You have active duty routes, you've got civil service, which are like Army civilians, so you're not active duty, but you are a federal employee. There's also, civil service jobs through the Department of Veterans Affairs. You can be a civilian contractor, right? There's lots of different avenues or points of entry per se. Got a couple different additional resources there on the screen at the bottom. If you want to learn more about the Army Medical Specialist Corps and the Civilian Medical Corps, there's some links there on some videos and more about employment in the Department of Defense if you guys are interested. These are kind of some of the global clinical practice areas that you might find OTs, PTs practicing in the Department of Defense. We have a lot of different practice areas, both on military installation as well as on the civilian side too. A little pay chart, just looking at the GS pay schedule. I can tell you most physical therapy and occupational therapy positions start off at GS 12 or GS 13. So anywhere between, 89 upwards to 138,000 a year. So the pay is not too bad. I want to also just share a couple quick resources with you guys. Back in 2009, we published through the Borden Institute, Care of the Combat Amputee. It's kind of an A to Z textbook, everything you want to know regarding amputee medical care and rehabilitation. I also kind of wanted to shamelessly plug a couple nonprofit community sports organizations. I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with a few of these. Move United, formerly known as Disabled Sports USA. Challenge Athletes Foundation, which is right in y'all's backyard there in San Diego. So hopefully you guys are familiar with CAF. If you're not, I encourage you guys to take a look at that website and some of the great work that they're doing for the disability community. And not only for that, but also individuals in terms of lots of opportunities for grant funding. Because as you guys may or may not know, adaptive sports specific equipment can be very, very costly in addition to regular adaptive equipment, durable medical equipment that somebody may need post-injury or insult. So just a couple of additional resources for you guys. And I got to finish with a quote from Dr. Ludwig Gutmann, the founding father of the U.S. Paralympic movement. If I ever did one good thing in my medical career, it was to introduce sport into the rehabilitation of disabled people. When I talk to students on a consistent basis about the importance of adaptive sport and its coupling with rehabilitation, I want you guys to fully appreciate and respect that adaptive sports in that sense is a rehab multiplier, that everything that we work on from an occupational therapy, physical therapy standpoint can be enhanced through those type of lived experiences, right? So the goal of these type of experiences, coupling adaptive sports with the outpatient rehabilitation process, should be to turn every client into a Paralympic athlete, right? Because let's face it, that's the highest echelon of sport, right? I mean, we got the U.S. Paralympics going on right now. So the goal should be to expose individuals to these different types of adaptive sports, leisure, and recreational opportunities, coupled with the outpatient rehabilitation standpoint. So if I say one last thing, as you guys are emerging into potential clinical practices, PTs and OTs, you should have the mindset and you should always be thinking about adaptive sports as being prescriptive in nature, just as anything else that we would prescribe for any of our clients, right? Because once again, the point is not to turn our clients into Paralympic gold medal athletes, right? The goal is to expose them to these type of lived experiences, which have been shown and evidenced in the literature that these type of experiences enhance clinical outcomes from a rehabilitation standpoint. So I've already talked enough. I'd like to open up the floor to any questions, comments you guys may have regarding my experiences in OT, my experience in the adaptive sports world. And once again, I applaud you guys for all y'all's efforts at the undergrad level from an education advocacy and an accessibility standpoint. You guys should already be able to appreciate that, funding, accessibility, and the knowledge of available resources are some really huge barriers when it comes to educating our clients on opportunities. So I'm gonna stop talking like I said it was 5 minutes ago and open the floor to questions.
I was interested if you could just talk a little bit about what your study with adaptive sports found.
Yeah, so great question. So thank you for asking that. So it was a qualitative research study in a nutshell. So first study of its kind. Basically, my two research questions are: what are the lived experiences of amputees engaged in adaptive sports experiences, and how do those experiences impact their quality of life? So basically, I borrowed a assessment tool, quality of life assessment from the World Health Organization. It was a Likert scale type assessment called the WHO Brief. And I modified it into an open-ended qualitative questionnaire, staying true to the four domains of areas, domain of that they had in the assessment tool. But I actually had 17 participants in the study. Nine ended up completing the study before we got to data saturation. But I had three main themes that came up, because it's a qualitative study using thematic analysis. Three main themes that came up. One of them was pearls of participation and enhancement of self through engagement. The other one was recognition of roadblocks as potential inhibitors. And then the third one I'm going to draw a blank on because you asked me, was we had recognition of roadblocks as potential inhibitors, um, enhancement of self, and then I'm drawing a blank on the third one. But a lot of the themes that came up were revolving around things that enabled somebody to be successful with adaptive sports experiences to begin with, and those personal gains that somebody achieved through those type of experiences. Some of that stuff aligned with some of the things that we knew about in the literature to begin with. I mean, the thing that we know about is it's pretty evident. I mean, the research out there on physical health benefits regarding sport participation that's been researched, I mean, exhaustively over the course of several decades, right? But the one thing that we haven't really done a good enough job on is documenting the impact of that lived experience and the impact on quality of life. And the nice thing about the World Health Organization, the HUQUAL Brief, which is probably one of the most robust quality of life assessment tools out there right now, is that it accounts for those other things other than physical health, right? Because the World Health Organization recognizes that quality of life consists of more things than just one's physical health, right? So I can tell you time and time again, a consistent finding across all participants in my research study was concurrent incorporation of adaptive sports experiences with outpatient rehabilitation enhances clinical outcomes, right? So those things that may be difficult, participating in adaptive sports, those type of components, those type of experiences may also be difficult on, somebody performing, common routine activity of daily living. So what we've been able to find is a lot of those things that one can accomplish through participation in adaptive sports experiences can enhance those other areas of rehabilitation that we're working on in a long-winded way. What else? What other questions you guys have?
How do you integrate your experience into the curriculum at St. Augustine? Do you guys work with veterans or how does that?
Okay, I'm sorry, Colleen. I heard some background noise. Repeat the question one more time.
So how do you integrate your experience into the teaching at St. Augustine? Do you have opportunities to work with veterans
Oh
or is it
yeah,
more what you provide in class?
absolutely. Great question. Thank you for asking that, Kalina. So a couple different things. First off, we just recently, I would say recently, several years ago, we established the Austin chapter of the student. We got a Student Veterans Association, SVA, which is a kind of a collegiate organization. We established our Austin chapter a few years ago. We've got a fairly healthy population of military service veterans that are actually students in our program because we have PT, OT, we got speech language pathology programs, at least on our Austin campus. The other thing too, kind of add on to that too, I teach a variety of different courses at the university to include human movement for occupational performance. I teach an assistive technology class, and then I also teach a wellness and health promotion course, along with a couple others. But in our assistive technology course, we actually have several off-campus labs scheduled throughout the term. We partner up with some community partners. One of our local partners is Lone Star Paralysis, which is a 501c supporting the rehabilitation needs of those individuals that have sustained spinal cord injuries. So we've got a couple of our community partners are really involved in adaptive sports with Lone Star paralysis, that have sport specific wheelchairs, right, for wheelchair basketball. So we'll have a whole lab where we'll take our OT students out into the community to play wheelchair sports for half a day. So, and then working with those community partners too, there's lots of fundraising opportunities that we do through our a variety of our student organizations too on our Austin campus. So, and then one other way, I guess too, we just recently, it'll be 2 years ago this August, we established, a colleague of mine and me established our first ever community of practice through the American Occupational Therapy Association. And so we're currently up to like 75 members nationally, and we're trying to increase our numbers to increase, participation. So hopefully one day this can eventually turn into a certification process for OTs and PTs to become certified in adaptive sports.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? You guys are doing some good stuff out there in San Diego. What you got, Hayden?
I was wondering if you had kind of any advice. Obviously, you've dealt with some pretty serious injuries and patients with serious injuries, but do you
Yeah.
have any advice for kind of keeping people motivated to progress
Yeah.
when they're facing
Great.
that?
Yeah, great question. So, I tell students all the time, we often encounter our clients at the deepest, darkest times of their lives. And I don't know if you guys have had any shadowing or volunteer experience, PTOT. I mean, most programs out there require you to have some volunteer experience from time to time, but I'd say the biggest thing is we got to meet those clients where they're at in the recovery process, right? Just because something worked really well with the client before that had, say, for example, a lower extremity amputation, like a below knee transtibial amputation. I've worked with a number, thousands of clients that have had a below knee amputation, but you can't treat that next guy or that next person, that next client that walks into the clinic with a transtibial amputation the same way you did. Everybody comes to rehab with a different set of luggage per se, right? So we have to figure out, and that's like we call that therapeutic use of self, right? So what makes that client tick, right? What's their carrot? What's going to be that carrot that I can dangle in front of them? Because there's going to get a point in somebody's rehabilitation process where they, hit a wall or hit a point where, like I shared that story with you earlier about that airman. That was a point where he had a realization in his outpatient rehab process where he just needed to sit down and get some stuff. So I'd say, work really hard on developing rapport with your clients on day one, because I'm telling you, like that will endure some of the most difficult, challenging things, right? And even though there's been countless times I've had clients ask me questions that kind of outside the scope of my practice as an OT, but I'm like, more of like a case management question, but I'm like, hey, I don't have that answer, but I'm gonna find it out for you, And so make sure, you always follow through on stuff like that. And I'd say, not every day is going to be easy, right? And so you might hit a client on a really rough day. You might have a client show up at the outpatient clinic and you don't even know this client tried to wake up this morning. They missed their bus because they're not driving anymore. They stepped in a puddle. They got their shoe and sock wet. I mean, the morning's been stacked of nothing but, issues. And then they're coming to see you in OT or PT. So, you got to kind of meet that client where they're at each and every day. And I guess you got to be tuned into your client well enough to know when things are not right, like how to pull back and, see what's going on. Because sometimes you have to work really hard to get those layers peeled back to where you can identify, what's the foundation of the problem that may be going on. Because I mean, looking at complex polytrauma type rehab, unfortunately you hit those points in rehab where you got to find somebody, you got to get somebody motivated. I say humor too as well. Humor can go a long ways. When you can have fun in rehab, that's a game changer, because oftentimes some of the stuff we're working on is pretty painful. It can be, pushing through, trying to get, some range of motion gains for, frozen shoulder or whatever the case may be. Somebody post-operative don't want to move their arm. If you've ever had a fracture, what do you want to do? You want to pull it in close to your body. You want to protect it, right? You don't want some person working on it and trying to get it stronger and moving better for you. So meet the client where they're at and therapeutic use of self. What
Thank you.
else? These are good questions. Keep them coming. I love this.
At what point, like in the therapeutic process, if there is like a certain point, do you introduce adaptive sports?
Great question, William. Day one. And I know that sounds soon, but think about this. I'm already trying to get that in that person's head, right? Because I'll tell you, there's things that you can put into a client's head that I could sit there and tell them, I could talk to them for an hour. And once they see something for themselves, like I'll give you a case in point. I could sit here and tell you guys the best thing, adaptive sports is the best thing since sliced bread, this and that, blah, 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 right? But then you take somebody who has an above knee amputation, a transfemoral amputation, right? And you take them out to a community reintegration outing, right? Or adaptive sports outing where we're playing paintball. And you got somebody out there that's missing both legs above knee, bilateral transfemoral. And you got this new person, this new client is still inpatient, but they went on the outing with you just to kind of be a part of that community, right? Because there's benefit to that. And then that client who has that unilateral transfemoral single leg amputation, now witnessing that individual bilateral amputations doing stuff that they didn't think was going to be possible again. So you tell me the weight that just that visual holds compared to, me as a medical provider, right? I mean, getting back to that, we've seen and treated a lot of individuals that have been through similar injuries, but the reality of the matter of fact is until you've been down that road and you've sustained an amputation or a traumatic brain injury and you've had that lived experience, don't make that mistake that I made when I was a young OT and said, I know what you're going through, because unless you got street credit and you got that badge or that patch to show that you've been there and done that, probably shouldn't be saying that, right? But I think, sooner rather than later, start thinking about adaptive sports being prescriptive in nature, just like everything else, right? The problem is going to be is taking this military model of what we've shown to be so successful in the Department of Defense. You guys got to think occupational and physical therapists came out of the Department of Defense. We used to be called reconstruction aides back in the day. That was World War I, when our profession of occupational therapy was found in the Department of Defense, in the Army. So I think we have really strong foundations. The problem is we've been very slow to adopt this in the civilian side. And the problem is that, it's not sometimes people get exposed to different types of adaptive sports experiences at different timelines, right? Sometimes people may get exposed to them during their rehabilitation, outpatient. Maybe it's post-discharge, like months, years down the road, or maybe even several years down the road, or maybe they never get exposed. So I'd say, to get back to your question, William, like the sooner we can start getting these clients exposed to these experiences. And once again, the goal is not to turn them into a Paralympic athlete. The goal should be exposure and lived experience, because research has shown you give somebody these type of experiences, they're going to get better a lot quicker, a lot sooner, and they're going to stay healthier throughout their life if they maintain that. And I think that's one other thing that I found in my research study, going out 22 years post amputation and showing people still doing very well, still engaged, and mentally doing very well too as well. So you guys need to get out and do some more research on adaptive sports in the real world, because we need it. If it ain't documented and we ain't doing it. What else? Good questions. We got some good programs at USA. There's lots of other good programs out there too. I'm a bit biased. Obviously, I work for USA right now, but we got some good programs. There's some good programs out there. Make sure you guys do your research on programs out there, PTOT. If you guys got any questions later on about military, about OT, about adaptive sports, like don't hesitate to reach out. I can put my email in the chat box if you guys would like to have that.
I just have one last question.
Sure.
You talked about your experience in Europe. Did you see a big difference in how they treat adaptive sports and their progress in the adaptive sports world versus the progress in the United States?
Yeah, great question. So when I was over in Europe, I was still working. So I was working for the Department of Defense on a military base, but we still interacted with civilians, like German civilians, right? So I'd say like when I was over there working for the Warrior Transition Battalion, I was more in a supervisory, like program manager role. So PT, the battalion physical therapist and I were responsible for developing a lot of the adaptive sports programs that kind of were grassroots programs to get folks into the Paralympics. So we did a lot of like seating volleyball. We did a lot of like wheelchair basketball. Um, we did a lot of like hand cycling, stuff like that. So, it was interesting because when we even had Wounded Warrior Project, they had a actual office over in Landstuhl, Germany. And so we even had I don't know if you guys are familiar with Wounded Warrior Project, some of the programs they had, but we got a big soldier ride where, service members come out and ride bikes, for quite a long distance, various distances, different states and stuff. They're all over the United States. But we had a big soldier ride over in Germany when I was over there working for the Warrior Transition Battalion. It was kind of interesting to see the German civilians coming out because, cultures are very tricky and they're very different. When I lived over in Germany, one thing that I found is that the Germans are not, I guess I can say this because I got a little bit of German heritage, Ebner. So they're just not as accepting of those individuals with disabilities. And I say that because like we had friends of ours that had children that had special needs that when we would go to certain cities and stuff in Germany, we're out eating dinner, we'd have a lot of the locals like looking at our friends who had a daughter who was on the spectrum, and little, verbal and stuff at time to time, that didn't fit the mold of the German culture per se. So, and after talking to some of the people that I knew well over there, that were local Germans, they said, yeah, it's like oftentimes people kind of frown on disabilities, right? And so it's not as public as what it is, I guess, here in the States. And not as I don't want to say the rights aren't there because people still have rights, but it's kind of different, right? It just looks different, feels different in different cultures. So what else?
I forget the name of it, but it was the facility, I believe, in Austin where you transferred to after you became a civilian. Was that, or maybe it
Uh,
wasn't?
no, it was the Center for the Intrepid.
Yes. So
So
was
the Center for the Intrepid is a outpatient rehabilitation facility that's right outside Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas.
is that open to anyone, or is that specifically because you were in the military path?
Yeah, it's on a military base, so it's a Department of Defense. If you don't mind muting yourself, Colleen, I got some background noise coming through your headset. Thank you. So it's on a Department of Defense facility. So you can't. Okay, so you guys familiar with level one trauma centers? Kind of, sort of. Okay, level one trauma centers have basically all echelons of surgical care and specialty, healthcare services, all that stuff. So we got two level one trauma centers in San Antonio. One's University Hospital in San Antonio, and the other one's Brooke Army Medical Center. So with BAMC being a level one trauma center, civilians can come on the base, but like you have to check in through the gate and stuff. So the Center for the Intrepid, we have, believe it or not, there's only about 75 to 80 occupational therapists in the Army at any one time. There's very, very little numbers. And there's maybe about 150, maybe 180 PTs worldwide. I'm talking worldwide. So very small numbers. So most of the providers, healthcare providers in military medical treatment facilities are civilians, believe it or not. So they're either federal civilians or they're like contractors, right? They just take contracting jobs. So the CFI, the Center for the Intrepid, it is a Department of Defense facility. You do have to, you need to have a common access card to get on base, technically. To work there, you actually have to be a federal employee. There has been cases where students have been able to apply for internships there to get an internship, like a 3-month residency. But most of those, because we have Baylor, we started the Baylor OTD program several years ago. A couple of my colleagues, those Baylor graduates, they kind of have preference over the CFI and those other Department of Defense facilities, because these are clinicians that are going to be coming into the Department of Defense and the Army Medical Specialist course. So we need to make sure that those practitioners have the skill set that they need to take care of our service population, which in this case is orthopedics, polytrauma, amputees, burns, stuff like that. But you can get in there. You know, I still got base access because I'm a veteran. So, you know, from time to time, I'll take students on a tour of the CFI and stuff. We can get tours booked through the facilities and stuff, which is kind of neat because the CFI is kind of like the Walt Disney World of rehab. There's nothing like it in the world. There's only three. We have three amputee rehabilitation centers of excellence across the Department of Defense. One is in Bethesda, Maryland. One is in San Diego, and the other one is in San Antonio. Sorry. All right. Probably got time for one more question and comment. If you guys don't know who Dr. Ludwig Gutmann is, you need to look that up. And, oh, I almost forgot. The U.S. Paralympic sled hockey team, Friday, semifinals. I don't know if you guys are watching it. Now, this is a question for you guys. Don't look it up, okay? Don't look it up, whatever you do. No Google. How many gold medals have the U.S. sled hockey team won back-to-back Winter Olympics? Anybody want to take a guess?
5.
They won 4. They're up for their 5th, okay?
I'll wait a couple weeks and then maybe that'll be right.
Well, it's not going to be a couple of weeks. It's going to be a couple of days because we're going to have these rounds. Make sure you guys watch this game. They're playing. I don't know who they're playing. They just whooped up on China pretty bad yesterday, day before. But yeah, we got. I mean, Italy, Germany, and China was the preliminary rounds. They had a tough bracket to begin with, but yeah, they're going to bring home number 5. I'm very happy. I actually have one of the participants in my study was a 3-time gold medal Olympic athlete who's actually on that team. So it's kind of cool to know that we got some folks doing some good stuff out there. Make sure you guys watch that and support the team. All right.
All right.
Well, I want to thank you guys for everything. And you guys got my contact information. If y'all have any questions, need to get in contact, you know how to reach out.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ebner. We really appreciate you joining us and sharing your perspective.
You betcha. Y'all have a good evening. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Thank
Cool.
you.